America doesn't fear missiles. It doesn't fear armies. What America truly fears is losing control, and that's exactly what happened the moment Modi stepped foot in China. Think about it. When the leader of the world's largest democracy sits down with the leader of the world's fastest growing superpower, it's not just a visit, it's a signal that the global balance of power is shifting. And here's the part nobody's saying out loud. Washington isn't scared of the meeting itself. It's scared of what comes next. The trade deals, the military talks, the partnerships that could rewrite the future of Asia and the world. So today, I want to break down why America is afraid after Modi's China visit, not with noise or drama, but with facts, strategy, and the psychology of power. 1. Geopolitical shift. When we talk about America's fear after Modi's China visit, the first layer is the geopolitical shift. For nearly 80 years, the U.S. has dominated the global order. From Europe to Asia, from NATO to the UN, America has played the role of rule maker and referee. Countries leaned on Washington for leadership, guidance, and often permission. That's what superpower really means. Now imagine the scene. India's prime minister shaking hands with China's president. Two nations that together represent almost 3 billion people. Two civilizations with thousands of years of history. And two economies that are rising fast. This image alone challenges America's monopoly on influence. You see, geopolitics is not only about territory or trade, it's about symbols that change perceptions. When India and China sit across the table, the world sees possibility of cooperation without America in the middle. And that possibility weakens Washington's grip. This is why America is afraid. It's not because of what was said in the meetings, but because of what the meetings mean. They mean that countries can choose to engage directly without U.S. oversight. They mean a multipolar world is forming, where power isn't centered in Washington but spread across multiple capitals. Beijing, New Delhi, Moscow, and beyond. Once perceptions shift, reality follows. Global institutions, trade routes, and military strategies adapt to new centers of power. And in this new map, America risks becoming one of many players rather than the only leader. That's why Modi's visit is not a small diplomatic step, it's a geopolitical earthquake. The plates are moving, the balance is shifting, and America can feel the ground shaking beneath its feet. 2. Economic ties. The second reason America is afraid after Modi's China visit is economic power. Here's the truth. Money speaks louder than missiles. And when two of the largest markets on earth, India and China, start talking about trade, the world listens. China is the factory of the world. India is the fastest growing major economy. Now imagine if these two giants decide to deepen their economic ties. The scale is almost unimaginable. Together, they represent more than 1/3 of humanity. That means more consumers, more workers, and more innovation than any single country can match, even the United States. America knows this. Its biggest strength globally isn't just its military. It's the dollar, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and its dominance in global finance. But if India and China start trading in local currencies or building their own financial systems, America's economic dominance weakens. Another angle is technology. America has always led in innovation, semiconductors, software, AI, but China is catching up fast and India is a rising tech hub. If these two collaborate, they create an ecosystem that could challenge U.S. supremacy in the industries of the future. And let's not forget supply chains. Right now, America depends on both India and China for critical goods, from medicine to electronics. If these two nations decide to work together, they gain leverage that makes Washington vulnerable. So, America's fear is not abstract. It's about losing economic control, losing influence over global markets, losing the ability to dictate terms, and in today's world, that's more powerful than losing a battle on the ground. This is why Modi's visit to China matters. It's not just about politics. It's about a possible economic alliance that could rewrite the rules of global trade, and America knows that once money shifts, power shifts. 3. Strategic autonomy. The third reason America is uneasy is India's strategic autonomy. Let me explain. For years, Washington has assumed that India would naturally lean toward the U.S. side, especially because of border disputes with China. America counted on India as a partner in balancing Beijing's rise. That's the logic behind alliances like the QUAD. But here's the reality. India has always played by its own rules. It's not a follower. It's not a pawn. It's a nation with its own history, its own pride, and its own strategy. That's what we call strategic autonomy. Modi's visit to China is proof of this. By engaging directly with Beijing, India is saying, we make decisions based on our interests, not America's agenda. That independence unsettles Washington because it can't easily predict or control India's moves. Think about it. When a country acts independently, it becomes harder to influence, harder to pressure, and harder to manipulate. For America, that means less leverage. This is what America fears most, losing influence over India's choices. Because once India proves it can balance relationships with both the U.S. and China, it sets an example for other nations to follow. It shows the world that you don't have to pick sides. You can stand tall on your own. Strategic autonomy is power. It's the power to say yes, the power to say no, and the power to choose your own path. And in today's global chessboard, India is showing exactly that. For America, this independence feels like a threat. But for India, it's a declaration. We're not in your camp or theirs. We are in our own. And that's a message the whole world heard loud and clear after Modi's China visit. 4. Military implications. Now let's talk about the military dimension. America has built much of its foreign policy around one idea, balancing China's rise, and a key part of that strategy has been India. The U.S. sees India as a natural counterweight, a nation with a strong military, a growing navy, and a strategic location in the Indo-Pacific. But here's the problem. What happens if India and China start cooperating even partially? America's entire military strategy in Asia gets shaken. Think about it. If India reduces tensions with China, U.S. military planners lose the assumption of India as a reliable ally against Beijing. That means America can't count on New Delhi to stand shoulder to shoulder in a crisis. This changes everything: naval deployments, alliance structures, and even arms sales. The U.S. has invested billions in defense partnerships with India. But if India demonstrates it can manage its relationship with China independently, America's influence in the region shrinks. And here's another angle: arms balance. India is one of the largest buyers of defense equipment in the world. If cooperation with China leads to less reliance on U.S. arms, or worse, more cooperation with Russia, Washington loses both money and influence. But the deepest fear is psychological. The U.S. military likes clear lines, friends and enemies, allies and adversaries. India breaks that pattern. By talking to China, India shows that the lines aren't fixed. They're flexible, and that means America can't take loyalty for granted. So, in the military sphere, Modi's visit challenges the very foundation of U.S. strategy in Asia. It's not about India joining China against America. It's about India proving it doesn't need to play America's game, and that shift leaves Washington worried about the future of its Indo-Pacific plans. 5. Global alliances. The fifth layer is global alliances. America has worked for years to build coalitions that check China's rise, from NATO-like partnerships in Asia to groupings like the QUAD, consisting of the U.S., India, Japan, and Australia. The idea has been simple: surround China with alliances. But here's where Modi's China visit stings. It shows that alliances aren't as rigid as Washington wants them to be. India's willingness to sit down with Beijing suggests that even U.S. partners can keep doors open to China. This weakens America's strategy in two ways. First, it reduces trust. Other nations might think, if India, a Quad member, can talk to China, why can't we? Second, it reduces control. The U.S. can no longer assume that its alliances are airtight. Another point is the BRICS bloc: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. This group is growing, and it's openly challenging U.S.-led institutions like the IMF and World Bank. Modi's engagement with China strengthens BRICS and signals that India is serious about alternatives to Western frameworks. And let's not forget the global South. Many developing nations look to India as a voice of balance, a country that isn't fully in the U.S. or Chinese camp. If India leans toward cooperation with China, it encourages others to also resist U.S. pressure. In short, America fears losing the narrative of alliance unity, because once one key partner shows independence, others may follow. That's why this visit matters. It's not just about India and China. It's about the message to the entire world. Alliances can shift, friendships can be flexible, and no one has to live under one country's influence forever. And for America, that's a dangerous precedent. 6. Psychological fear. Finally, we get to the deepest layer, psychology. Fear isn't always about the present. Fear is about the future. And what America fears most after Modi's China visit is losing control over the story of who leads the world. For over a century, America has defined the narrative: freedom, democracy, open markets. It has been the architect of the modern order. But power is not just about military strength or economic size. It's about storytelling. Who gets to decide what progress looks like? Who defines leadership? Modi's China visit disrupts that story. It shows that leadership doesn't have to flow through Washington. That global influence can emerge from new partnerships, new voices, and new centers of power. This is the real psychological shock. America sees its monopoly on the global narrative slipping. The fear is not that India will suddenly abandon the U.S. It's that India will show the world there are other options. And psychology matters, because once people believe the U.S. is no longer the only leader, its influence fades automatically. Markets shift, alliances shift, and even public opinion shifts. So at its core, America's fear is about relevance, about no longer being the central player on the global stage, and that's why Modi's handshake with Xi feels so heavy in Washington. It symbolizes a future where the U.S. isn't the default leader, but just one of many voices. The lesson: true power isn't just about control, it's about flexibility. And if America can't adapt to a multipolar world, fear will continue to haunt its decisions. That's the psychology of power. That's the story behind America's fear. So, let's bring this all together. Why is America afraid after Modi's China visit? It's not about a single meeting. It's about what that meeting represents. It represents a geopolitical shift, the ground moving beneath America's feet as the world becomes multipolar. It represents the rise of economic ties that could rival Wall Street and Silicon Valley. It represents strategic autonomy, with India proving it doesn't belong in anyone's camp but its own. It represents military implications, shaking America's Indo-Pacific strategy. It represents the reshaping of global alliances, proving that frameworks aren't fixed, they're flexible. And most of all, it represents a psychological fear: America losing control over the story of who leads the future. Now, here's the truth. Fear is not weakness. Fear is information. When America fears this visit, what it's really saying is, we see change and it threatens the old way of doing things. And that's the lesson for all of us. Whether you're a nation or an individual, the world doesn't stay still. Power shifts, markets shift, relationships shift. The question is, will you adapt or will you cling to the past? India's message is clear: adapt. Don't wait for permission. Don't play by someone else's script. Write your own. That's what strategic autonomy looks like. That's what leadership in a new world order looks like. So yes, America is afraid. But that fear is simply the sound of the future knocking on the door. A future where influence is shared, where nations stand on their own, and where the story is no longer written by one capital, but by many. And that future, it has already begun. America doesn't fear missiles. It doesn't fear armies. What America truly fears is losing control, and that fear became real the moment Modi stepped foot in China. Think about it. The leader of the world's largest democracy sitting with the leader of the world's second largest economy. It's not just a meeting, it's a signal that the balance of global power is shifting, and Washington knows it. The first reason is the geopolitical shift. For decades, America has been the referee of global politics. But India and China talking directly tells the world, we don't need a referee anymore. That weakens Washington's position as the sole power broker. Second, economic ties. India is the fastest growing major economy, and China is the factory of the world. Together, they represent more than 1/3 of humanity. If they expand trade, it creates an economic ecosystem powerful enough to challenge U.S. dominance in finance and technology. Third, strategic autonomy. Modi's visit proves India is not a pawn on Washington's chessboard. India makes its own choices in its own interest. That independence unsettles America, because influence slips when nations refuse to play by your script. Fourth, the military angle. America's Indo-Pacific strategy relies on India as a counterweight to China. But if the two nations reduce tensions, the foundation of U.S. defense planning weakens overnight. Fifth, alliances. Groupings like QUAD only work if members stay aligned. India's outreach to China shows flexibility, proving alliances aren't permanent. They're negotiable. That shakes America's confidence. And finally, the psychological fear. At its core, America worries about losing the narrative. Who leads the future world order? Modi's visit signals that leadership no longer comes from one capital, but from many. So here's the message: America's fear is not about India's visit, it's about India's rise. The world is watching a new chapter unfold, where nations write their own stories and no one country dictates the rules. Remember this: fear always comes before change. America is afraid because the future is shifting, and in that future, India is not just participating, India is leading.